Hey, welcome back to another episode of Dealer Confidential, where we're pulling the curtain back on dealership transactions. Greg, we had so much fun on the last one with this buying a franchise dealership. We got to do more of it. This is part two of buying a franchise dealership.
Yeah, exactly. And we got a couple of emails about that, Hal, because there's just so much on this subject.
Yeah, I mean we can't stop halfway. I mean this is a football season, right? So we do an audible, and we're getting going, and we change the signal at the line of scrimmage, and we're going to keep talking about this thing.
You got it. Okay, where are we picking up?
Well, we kind of talked a lot about the buyer and the prep and landing on a target, whether it be in the public domain or unmarketed. Let's assume we've now found the right opportunity. What happens now?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest and the hardest part of what we do. The easiest part is that you get the buyer very excited. You get the seller very excited about possibly selling, because at this point the seller wants to sell. It's not like we're calling him, cold calling him and asking him, hey, are you interested in selling? So right now we zeroed in on a seller. And of course we have our buyer ready, hopefully ready to move in that franchise. Now, don't forget that we custom tailored this buy around our seller. And so we know the market area. The seller knows the market area. He picked it. He authorized us to move forward on that market area and the brand that he's looking for. So right now, one would say that it's done. We're done. We found the franchise. Two parties agree. Let's just move on and close. That is probably the furthest thing from what we're able to do, because right now really starts the hard work, and the hard work is called due diligence. So let's spend a little bit of time, Hal, talking about due diligence and valuations, and then we'll jump into negotiating and closing dates and all that other things. But right now, it's due diligence. It's, hey, is this for real? Tell me about it.
Well, first of all, let's make sure that we're on the same page with price, with value, with terms. So we've got the right dealership identified. We do a valuation, and if there's some differences, we have to get involved in terms of negotiation. And there's a big negotiation, but there's also lots of little negotiations in one of these deals, right? So Greg and I will spread the numbers. We'll go back 3, 4, 5 years. We'll look at the cash flow. We'll recast it. We'll price it. We've talked about dealership pricing, parts, FFE, multiple of the cash flow, and what goes into the multiple. If there's real estate involved, we either buy the real estate, or we'll normalize the real estate on market value to determine the cash flow. Is it through the business or through the real estate? Lots of stuff to do there, and we'll negotiate, right? Yeah. And that's not, it's a car deal, but it's not like buying a car. Buying a car dealership is a lot different than buying a car, right?
And you use the word multiple. We've been using the word in the past, blue sky. So blue sky and multiple are synonymous with each other. And that's what, when we say due diligence, it's just, as Hal mentioned, it's just not looking at the books. It's looking at the entire picture of what this dealership is. Due diligence includes things like, as we said before, the blue sky, includes, parts, includes equipment, includes looking at the market area. And then we haven't even talked about the OEM yet. We'll talk about the OEM in a couple of minutes. But right now, what we're looking at, and what I look at, and Hal looks at, is the dealership itself. Okay, what is it really worth? Number one, the dealer says X, and we say Y. We say Y no matter what, because we're never going to agree to the initial price anyway. We're working for, you're working for your side, Hal, and I'm working for my side. So that's when we come together in the middle. But we look at this and we say the dealer is expecting X number of dollars. The dealer has to prove beyond a doubt in our minds, our attorneys' minds, and of course the buyer's mind, that that X is really what this franchise and dealership and real estate is worth. The dealer has to prove that. We don't have to prove that. So we start with, again, I use the word, and Hal used the word too, is we start our due diligence. The due diligence starts from, like Hal said, going back multiple years, reviewing financial statements. Then we start looking at the real estate. Then we start looking at the market. And each of these, let's not kid each other. Each of these could take a month, months to put together the research. And then, of course, we put together a package that we present to both parties with what we think is a fair value. Go ahead. What we think is a fair value.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that all of that is usually expressed in what's called an LOI, short for letter of intent. A buyer, Greg's buyer, will develop with their attorney, sometimes without the attorney, because it's non-binding. It's a non-binding expression of interest to acquire a dealership business and real estate. Let me say that again. A non-binding expression of interest to buy the business or the real estate. It will go through exactly what Greg was just articulating, the offer, the high-level offer of price for these various components, and allocate that price. It will discuss the timing of and the nature of the due diligence. It will generally include an exclusivity clause and a confidentiality clause. Now, I said a minute ago it was non-binding. Those two aspects, exclusivity and confidentiality, are generally the only two binding elements of a letter of intent. All right. Now, why is there exclusivity? What does that mean?
Right.
What that means is the buyer, because he's going to spend time and effort and money with an attorney, he wants me as the selling broker not to talk to anybody else while he's investigating the purchase of this dealership, while he's kicking off his initial due diligence. So he's going to want exclusivity and protection while he does that. Now, me as the seller broker will want to put a time limit on just how long that business is going to be off the market while this buyer explores and discovers and asks the questions that Greg is alluding to earlier. So how long is that period? Well, some buyers want 60 days or 90 days. And as a selling broker, I want to try to limit that to no longer than 45 days if possible, recognizing that there'll be due diligence after that period, but that I'll want to see the contract, the asset purchase agreement, APA for short. So LOI leads to an APA. LOI first, and then 45 days later, or 30 or 60, whatever it is, we get into an asset purchase agreement. All right. And there's a due diligence period between the two where the buyer goes off with his CPA and with his attorney and with his broker, Greg, to develop the legally binding contract, which is called the asset purchase agreement. So the LOI, let's talk about, we could talk about it in terms of relationship, right, Greg? So, when you're dating and you want to go steady, you don't want the girl or the boy to talk to any other boy or girl. You give you want to go steady. That's the LOI. And then when you give the girl the ring and she becomes your fiance, that's the asset purchase agreement, right? You formalize it. You formalize the relationship. And then the closing is the wedding. Okay? So there's degrees of formality and degrees of commitment as you're moving through the stages of buying this dealership. Not to get corny on you, Greg, but I mean that's how it works, Yeah. And then confidentiality. I mean, the other binding thing is we're not going to talk to anybody else about this deal while it's, now or later. If it even blows up, we got confidentiality that's binding, right? So we're not going to tell anybody.
Part of our due diligence, Hal's and my due diligence, he's on the seller side, I'm on the buyer side. We really look into our clients. We really, really do. We mentioned it in podcast 8, how deeply we look into their financial history, their their background, their marital status, anything like that could affect the deal. We look into all of it. And some people are uncomfortable with that. But you better get used to it, because we're not going to be the only people looking into it. The OEM is going to look far deeper and harder than we will into presenting you to the OEM, because the OEM is looking at a true marriage between you and their franchise and their products. So they're going to be very, very conscientious about who they're going to award this to, or who they're even going to start the process with. So let's back up. We're not at that OEM stage. We're far from it. Right now, we're at the like Hal said, we're thinking about getting engaged. That's the LOI.
That's right.
And as he said before, the asset purchase agreement, that's the, hey, we're engaged. Now we got to figure out when we're going to get married.
That's right.
This could take months. And I always educate our prospects and our dealers to the fact this is not a 1 month, 2 month process. This could be extended. So get used to it. Don't quit your day job. That's what I always say to I was talking to a client yesterday, and I just said to him, don't quit your day job. Okay. You need to continue.
Yeah.
You need to continue because the OEM is going to want to see that you're continuing and that you're currently working and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So,
and the OEM doesn't even know that there's a deal until we finalize and execute the asset purchase agreement. So the LOI doesn't go to the OEM. Okay. The LOI is between buyer and seller and brokers and the attorneys. And what are some of the things, Greg, that we're going to look at? We're going to look at the tax returns. Mm-hmm. We're going to compare the tax returns to profit and loss statements and the balance sheet to see if they reconcile. We're going to start asking questions about the employees, and are there key employees that we want to pay special attention to? We're going to be looking at the receivables and the payables. We're going to be looking at any number of things during the due diligence process, right? There'll be a list of 30 or 40 things that we're going to be. Right. What's the DMS supplier? What are the contracts that are outstanding with the dealerships? Do we want the dealer to cancel those? Do we want the dealer to continue those? All of these, we're going to look at the customer deposits. We're going to look at the work in process. We're going to start talking about all these little gears that turn the medium-sized gears that turn the big gears on a deal.
I have to, we brought this up in one of the previous podcasts. I have to remember you remember our dealership in I'm not going to say the state. It was a Ford dealership. And we were looking at this dealership, looking hard at it. And there were a couple of things I mentioned in podcast 2 or 3, whatever, that we were down there. I noticed that there were a number of state troopers' cars there. And this turns out that the dealer had a contract with the state to service the troopers' vehicles, but it wasn't shown anywhere. They didn't consider that for some strange reason. They did not consider that as an asset to their dealership. So Hal and I immediately saw that as an asset, a huge asset, and how it was worked and how they work it and how they move that forward. So all of a sudden, it's an added profit center. Yes, was it included in the P&L for service that they had serviced all these additional vehicles? Yes. But to have that type of contract is something you could market, you could expand on, you could bring to other counties and anything else away from your current location. So you could expand dramatically if you're a recognized, approved vendor to service, in this case, it was state troopers vehicles. But imagine if you're approved vendor to service state construction vehicles or the city's pickup trucks or whatever. Huge opportunities, huge. And those are
Yeah.
the things that we ferret out during the due diligence period. And
Yeah.
due diligence period, remember, due diligence period maybe entails on us changing and negotiating the purchase price of I was going to say vehicle, the purchase price of this store.
Yeah.
Al is going to fight it in the sense that he's going to say, hey, it's worth 50 cents. And I'm going to say, no, it's worth 25 cents. And we're going to have to go back and forth on it and how they arrived at that. So all of this is still part of evaluating what the franchise, what the dealership, and we haven't even gotten deeply into what the real estate is worth. We did that a little while ago. But these are all part of the due diligence, and these are all part of they call it valuation of the property and the franchise.
Yeah. And we're going to look at like employees and the benefits of employees and the pay plans of the employees. We're going to see who's running the store, what roles are they playing, how much are they paid, what kind of benefits do they have, what kind of vacation policy do they have a 401k, all of these things, because the buyer is going to have to step into some of these things, right? I mean, they're going to lose a lot of people if they come in and cut everybody's pay plan, or they eliminate benefits that the employees have been getting. So they need to understand all of the commitments. Sometimes dealers offer, free oil changes for life, right? So the new dealers got to be aware of all these future obligations, if you will, that they've got out there in the public domain, because they're going to have to continue to offer these things or make some kind of concession to eliminate. So lots of little bitty gears running through the deal right now. And Greg mentioned it, the real estate. Now, typically after the asset purchase agreement, then we'll kick off the appraisal, because the asset purchase agreement is going to have some conditions. It's kind of like a prenup. All right. So, we're going to use the relationship analogy again, but we're engaged, but we got a prenup. What's the prenup? Well, the prenup is we're going to have to see what the appraisal comes in on the real estate. We're going to have to do the phase 1 environmental study, make sure that that's clean. We're going to have to put a condition in there that the franchise is going to approve us, because again, we haven't sent it to the franchise yet, right? So if the franchise turns us down, we want to back out of this deal, right? Continuing to represent the financials and making sure that the business is continuing to operate in the way that it's historically operated. We're going to put things in there like you can't throw out these huge bonuses while we're in negotiation here, because that could alter the employee landscape for us. So there's a bunch of conditions that we start talking about
Right.
as we move from LOI to APA.
Right. And I mean, we're just touching upon a tenth of them, what we're talking about here, that we feel comfortable talking about in an open podcast. Once you become clients of ours, we'll really, really get into the depth of how important all of these little aspects are. They're all little, but they amount to something very big. And that's, as Hal said, the asset purchase agreement. But before we get there, what we didn't mention is that if you're talking to me, you're going to have cash. You're going to have to be able to afford this whole process. Now, you may not have all the cash. We will help you find cash, whether it's an outside equity firm, whether it's a small business loan, whether it's, in some case, we talked about in episode 8, a minority program that funds minorities in new business ventures in that market area. These are all the things we do. We talk about not only that, but we go to the local commerce. We go to the local state commerce, and we find out and again, I'm not giving away any secrets, because if you don't know how to do it, you can't do it. What loans are available, what grants are available, what this is, everything. We do all that for you. So that's still part of, we're in the letter of intent area. Looking at, I use the word viability. Is this viable? Is this deal viable? Do we have a viable seller? Do we have a viable buyer? If we do, then we go to an LOI. The LOI is going to have cash attached to it. You're not going to be able to put an LOI up unless you show some real due diligence and not due diligence. Sorry, some cash to give the buyer as a deposit to show that you're real.
Yeah, to that point, why would a seller take a business off the market without having some indication of the financial viability of the deal, right? I mean, so when I'm a seller broker, I'm never gonna sign an LOI until I have a good feeling, well, two good feelings. One on the operations standpoint, I'm gonna find out who's gonna run this deal. Oh, you own a bunch of Burger Kings? Well, guess what? That's great when you're hungry, but you're not going to be able to buy a dealership with it.
Right.
So I'm going to look operationally. I'm going to look financially before the seller signs the LOI, right, and goes steady with the buyer. Okay, because why waste? Why even do that? And why take the business off the market for a day, much less 30 days or 45 days?
Yeah, we've got about 9 minutes left, and there's still so much to cover. Al mentioned we're going to be putting together when we get to the asset purchase agreement. That's when I start with Hal's help to put together a package for the OEM, because at the asset purchase agreement, it's time to let the OEM know. If we sort of kind of haven't done a nod and a wink to the OEM already, we have to let them know that, hey, we're going to try to move forward with this deal, and we need your help. So Hal and I will put together an extensive package to present to the OEM, and many times Hal and I will go physically to the OEM, wherever they may be, and actually present this dealer or I should say the deal and the dealer to the OEM. It is an interview process, and it's an extensive interview process. And I won't go too much into detail about that. But get ready, because it is extensive. But we're going to be there. This is what we do. We help you, and we even bring our lawyers and counsel, whatever it takes to get this done. So we're at the point right now then of, as you mentioned before, negotiation. We're assuming that at this point we have to, because we're in asset purchase agreement. The asset purchase agreement is going to have a firm price in there. Okay, we have to have negotiated by now what this property is worth, franchise worth, real estate worth, assets worth, fixed ops worth. When I say fixed ops, I mean equipment and everything else, FF&E. Okay, we're going to have all that in the asset purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is real. It's the deal.
It's legally binding. We're married, right?
Yep.
I mean,
with substantial deposits, with all that other wonderful stuff. And we're halfway down the road right now. So let's pick it up for the next 7 or 8 minutes, Hal. And we're at the point of asset agreements done, OEM approval in process.
Pending,
And we're going to get, that's another whole, we talked about that already in one of our other podcasts. That's another whole episode I think that we should look into, how intensive the OEM approval process is. How do you do it and everything else. I'm not going to get into it now. So
go ahead.
Yep.
So the funding's now, we got to figure out, like, it's private equity or bank. We're going to be doing real estate appraisals. We're going to be doing phase ones. If the phase one comes back dirty, then we're going to be doing phase twos. We're getting all of our house in order to execute this contract, right? And there's all these conditions that we've got to satisfy. We're going to make the list of all the contracts that are either going to be terminated at closing or continued. We're going to apply for the floor plan. Okay, a big deal, right? We're going to start looking at the parts. If there's a parts appraisal, we're going to start to order that and get that lined up timing wise with what we think will be closing, because we want to do that fairly close to closing. If the equipment needs to be appraised, all of this needs to get ordered. If the buyer needs to get insurance for the loan, he's going to have to go. There's literally hundreds of things to do.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So all of that stuff, all of that stuff is going on in the background of this deal while the OEM is doing its thing. And we're working with the OEM to answer their questions. We're doing a sales and profit forecast that's going to generate an operating investment and a working capital minimum guide Then they're going to want to see the money that goes into the working capital of the deal. And there's certain parameters around that with debt to equity ratios that we've got to meet. It's busy.
Yeah, and let's just talk about two things. I mean, we have about 5 minutes left, so I think we can cover the closing, the post closing, and all that other wonderful stuff. The difference between Hal and I is that we're partners. Okay, there's not an adversarial position here. In most cases, in a buy sell or a franchise buy, you have an adversarial position in the sense that the buyer has his attorneys, he has his broker, the seller has his attorneys, has his broker, and immediately it turns into adversarial headbutting. Hey, no, this, that, whatever. It goes back and forth. With Hal and I working together, have for years, we don't have that problem. We address all of those issues ahead of time so that we have a smooth close. A smooth close will give the OEM confidence. It will give the seller confidence. And of course, it gives the buyer confidence as well. So our objective is to have as smooth a close as possible. And that close is now. We're almost to that point conceptually in this podcast that we have everything lined up, Hal. Now, what do we do?
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, so the OEM will actually send the sales and service agreements to the buyer. The buyer will execute them, but the OEM will not execute. They'll execute after we tell them that we've had a closing, right? We'll notify them. So it's a little bit different, right? Because they're going to terminate the dealer, and they're not going to terminate the dealer until they are convinced that there's a new dealer ready to position, right? So it's a termination and an appointment kind of at the same time, if you will. So Greg will get his side ready. I'll get the seller's side ready. We'll meet. There's going to be things like a work in process. There's going to be customer deposits. There's vehicle holdback that's been paid. There's a lot of little adjustments right at the end, okay, that we do. We got the purchase price, but then there's all these adjustments. We're going to make all that happen and roll it in. We're going to have a bill of sale and a contract. And generally, the OEM sends a notice that says, when you consummate the deal, when you close the transaction, send us this notice, because then they've got to do a lot of systems changing in the background. They got to unplug one dealer and plug a new dealer in. There are dealer codes, there's parts and accessories codes, there's all this, there's floor plans, all those vehicles, all those vehicles from the new car floor plan move from one floor plan to another. There's the used cars that are they buying the used cars? Those get on another used car floor plan. Again, a lot of noise, and it all happens. And that's why when you call me or Greg when we're in closing week, you're going to get us in a different frame of mind than we are right now, because we're pulling our hair out, making sure all of the little stuff is handled. We notify the OEM. They then execute the sales and service agreement, and we have a new dealer.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched upon, we got just a couple of minutes, we haven't touched upon licensing, applying for license, state and municipality licenses to run this business, which you're going to have to do.
Dealer
all
license.
of those things could be mind-boggling to the average dealer or person, especially if you're an independent and haven't had to do this before. So those are all some of the things that we cover. So let's get into what we're going to be talking about next week. Because
do you think we've covered this? Are you comfortable with the? I don't think we'll ever get it all done, Greg.
Never have.
I think we're far enough to where the viewers have an idea of the complexity of buying a franchise store. I think the next one ought to be on the sell side.
Yes.
So that they get a full picture of buy side and then sell side.
Right.
So let's try that next. Maybe we can get it done in one. Maybe it'll take two as well.
Yeah.
But this is, we're in the nuts and bolts of this stuff right now.
Yeah. So next week we will do selling your franchise dealership, and we'll cover all of the things that we anticipate that you're going to have as a seller. And I probably will inject some of the buyer aspects into that podcast as well, because they do overlap considerably with each other.
There's no way of talking about selling without talking about buying.
Got to have one without, can't have one without the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do us a favor. When you see this podcast, click on the QR code, register with us. That gives you access to Hal's wonderful white page report that he gets out every month. And it also gives you access to our emails and our blasts that have come out. And sometimes we'll give you access to the podcast in advance, so you can see some of the future podcasts. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be having special guests come on. We're going to have our attorneys come on, our automotive attorney experts. We'll have some marketers come on. We'll also have some F&I people come on and talk about how we make money and how we could assure that the dealer's success. So
Yeah, I think we also ought to do a Q&A session too, Greg. We'll take questions from the audience and do a podcast just on answering their questions. How's that sound?
So,
Yeah.
QR code, log in, get registered with us, send us your questions, as Hal just mentioned, and we'll answer them online. And if we look at the questions in advance and it requires an expert or other experts, like an attorney or, like Hal said before, a CPA or anything like that, we'll get them on the show with us to answer some of those valuable questions for you. So log in, click QR code, tell us who you are. We'd love to have you join our family. And good show, Hal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Greg. Awesome.
Okay, see you guys soon.
See you next time.